In all my life, I was never involved in a war conflict, but I know that lots of guys of my same age before me was conflicted to fight and suffer for the war consequences. That's the reason why I choose this paper for my presentation, because the authors that were three US Bureau researchers analyzed the long-term effects about war. Especially they speak about the consequences of Vietnam War in terms of health and of related disability transfer income. I will structure my presentation in this way. I will before explain the purpose of the paper. Then I will say the consequences of Vietnam War in terms of health and of transfers. I will show the data that are used for the analysis. In the end, I will explain which are the main results and the conclusion. The US government have got a veteran disability compensation program, which is a program that award all the veterans with some money depending on the level of disability. Surprisingly, in the late 90s, it was registered a very huge growth for the VDC costs. And most surprisingly, this growth has been driven by the Vietnam era military claims. So also if the Vietnam War ended many years before, there was a growth that was caused by the Vietnam claims in the late 90s. To understand this phenomenon, the authors analyze two possibilities. The first one is that a deterioration about health condition for veterans bring this growth. And the second one is that the incentives that are embedded for new income for the poorer veterans create this kind of growth. Before starting, I would like to repeat some words that were said by Martin Luther King. And he said these words in 1967 and about the Vietnam War. And he died exactly 1 year later. And he said the life and history give eloquent testimony to the fact that conflicts are never resolved without trustful give and take on both sides. And this is my mind, is what the military gave for their nations in the Vietnam War, because these are the main diagnoses that are compensated with, are awarded with veteran compensation. The main one is PTSD, it means post-traumatic stress disorder, and so are linked with all the mental problems like psychiatric problems. There are problems with disease about hearing, scars, generalized musculoskeletal condition, hypertension, arthritis, and knee impairment. I put in evidence just the number about the PTSD veteran compensation, because they are both the most relevant, but also the one who registered the highest increase. We can see that the number of people who claim for a compensation for PTSD almost doubled. Here, this figure shows the increase, and we can see a huge jump in the VA compensation that includes the VDC costs. And we have to know that Vietnam Benefits Administration in the late 90s presume an individual unemployability also to some people that before have to file some documents. This is very relevant in terms of costs, because the IU status, the individual unemployability, determine the maximum amount of VDC. And so maybe this growth has been driven also by a simplification about the procedure to obtain an IU. This is the main source of data, that is the 2000 census. The authors create an extract about this census, and they select that is composed only by men that was born between 1948 and 52, and so that can be draft eligible for the Vietnam War. and they create some correlation that express the likelihood about these people to were draft eligible, or the likelihood that these people present any kind of disability, like work disability or non-work disability, or to receive transfer income. We are going to focus our attention especially on the first row, the other income that are mostly VDC. The second source of data is related with the 2000 census, but analyze a variable that is the draft eligibility. During the Vietnam War, US government held some draft lotteries to select their soldiers. And each man was associated with a number, a random sequence number. Smaller what is this number, highest was the possibility that a person was called for conscription. And this source of data is very important because it allows the researcher to do two kinds of estimation. The first is an ordinary least square, analyzing the census data. And the second is a two-stage least square, who analyze the draft lottery first stage. But the second one is a little bit more specific because it eliminates the bias about all the people that were taxable and also are precluded from military service. And this is very important because our results are most relevant for the two SLS. And we can see here some problem that this number represents the likelihood about people that were draft eligible and that was born between 1948 and 52 to have any kind of disability. This likelihood is linked just with non-work related disability, not with work disability. And there's here the likelihood that this kind of man received a transfer income like VDC that is really bigger. It's 0.32. Instead, the likelihood to have a non-work disability is 0.13. That's the reason why we could consider a non-work related disability rates a reflection of a negative causal impact of military service. But this doesn't seem consistent because the effects are too small to explain the increase in disability related transfer, and because the effects are non-work related, on work related disability are nearly zero. So the authors try to share the veterans, creating four groups that depends on their predicted wage. There are four wage index percentile, and the four groups that depends on their level that they reach of schooling. That comprehends people who drop out high school, and the best level is people that achieve a degree college. The main results here are more evident because we can see that the likelihood for the lowest skill group to have to present any kind of disability is really bigger than the highest group. Also, the likelihood to receive other income like VDC almost doubled. You can see it. Here is 0.073, here is 0.032, so it's very relevant. And also that there's a marked decrease in employment and labor force participation among men in the lowest skill group, like we can see by this number. We can see here it's also negative for the highest skill group. That's the reason. So maybe the possibility that the likelihood for the lowest class to receive an IU status can be a possible answer for our main purpose. So for the question that is if the growth of VDC was have been driven by a deterioration of health condition, or by a simplification about the procedure. And the conclusion is that the growth of EDC are not linked with the deterioration of veterans' health condition, but with incentives to claim for an income transfer by the lowest class. We have seen that it was easier to achieve an IU determination, so people with a low wage prefer to obtain an individual unemployability status and to receive other income. What is my conclusion is that it's not possible to predict the costs about a war, but there is only one reality that we know, that we have to analyze, we have to focus our attention on policy and on regulatory choice, because it's policy that determines if to start or not to start a war. And the only thing that we know is that the costs to start a war in terms of money, but also in terms of disease and deaths, are always high. I don't know if there are any questions, but I conclude.